Good afternoon again. This is the Sutra 23, Ishwar Pranidhan Nadva. Now, just an overview in the sense that we can divide our spiritual journey into two parts. The first part where we take the help of an external teacher or guru. If we don't take the help of an external teacher or guru, then we take the help of a teaching or some form of outer understanding, which leads us to a certain path. And here there is talk of the word used is Ishwar. We'll go into the word, but just offhand that the soul within us. Gurdjieff says man does not have a soul. Man has to create a soul. He does not mean this literally. He's talking about something else. So there is this soul within us, what we call as Jeev. It is the soul which seeks a human form for its own growth, maturity, and development to rise on the ladder of consciousness. And so a certain point in the journey comes where the soul is fully manifest. The soul is fully expressed. And then another part of the journey starts, and that is from the soul to the spirit inside. So from where we are, our present level of consciousness, to the Jeev, the soul. And once the Jeev has manifested, as Gurdjieff says, we have created a soul. Then we don't go according to an outer guru or an outer teaching. It is that soul which guides us on our further journey towards the spirit. It would be easy to explain this a little if we were to use some terms from Christianity. So in Christianity, there is talk of the Father and the Son. So the Son is called Christ, of course. And we make an effort, an inner journey where the inner Christ expresses itself, it manifests itself. So this is the manifestation of the soul. Then that inner Christ leads from where he is to his Father. So this is the second part of the journey, and this is done through the guidance of the inner soul, or what Mr. Tavaria would have called the inner guru. And he used to always say that my only, effort is to take you towards your inner guru, and then he will show you the path from there. So today we are talking about this inner guru, Ishwara. Now, the beauty in Patanjali is that he has given definitions for most of the terms he has used. He's also given a definition of the word Ishwar, but that comes in the next sutra, 24. So we are using the word here before we even learn his definition of the word. Now, the sutra is Ishwar Pranidhanad Va. Va. Va is a conjunction, it means or. That is, he is relating this sutra to some other sutra which we have already gone through. So if you see Sutra 22, Tivra Sangveganam Asana, the goal is near, asana being near, for those whose aspiration is very high, for those whose intensity is very high. And then he says in the next sutra, there is three kinds of intensity, mrudu, madhyadi, adhimatratvat, that is slow, middling, and fast. So here we would relate this sutra not to the previous sutra, but the one before that. That is Tivra Samvegana Asana. Asana means that goal is near. The goal is near. And so he's saying Va. So the goal is near for people whose intensity is high, whose aspiration is high. But it is, this nearness can also be achieved through Ishwar Pranidhan. Va. Or this this nearness to that goal of Ishwar can be achieved through Ishwar Pranidhana. Of course, in the next sutra, he says, Tivra Samveg. He says the intensity should be fast, but Samveg, balanced intensity. And here he's showing a different path, which Tawariya Sahib has translated as devotion to Ishwara. That if you can have a devotion to Ishwara, then that nearness can also be achieved through devotion. Whether he's talking about bhakti and all, that is for philosophers to decide. But we can say one thing, that he has a specific definition of Ishwara in the next sutra. We cannot have Ishwar as a concept of our mind, or we can't have Ishwar as a vritti, yoga vritti, chitta vritti, nirodha, as a new vritti of Ishwara. So, but here, because we have not come to that sutra, we still have some freedom here in defining what is Ishwara. Pranidhan. Dha, it comes from the root dha. Dharan karu, to be able to hold. Where are my other glasses? Yeah, now it's better. To be able to hold, to place the mind on something, that is, to place the mind totally on something, which we will just now take as Ishwara. Dha is to place the mind on something. And from dha, we have the word dhan. And we use this word dhan when we talk of attentiveness. Avdhan means attentiveness. So it has to do with attention. And there are two prefixes given to this word, pra and ni, pranidhan. That is dhan, nidhan, pranidhan. Now this word ni, it means to take down and place there, or to take inwards and to place there, down and inwards. The word, the prefix
Ketab, the video is stuck. We can't hear also.
I think even Ketav is not on the radar.
No, sir, he is.
Yes.
Yes, he is. Can you hear, Ketab?
taking attention back to the source of attention. There is a fulfillment of our inner journey. Come here, your internet connection is bad. So dha, to gather our attention totally, ni, to take it in, and pra, to take it back to the source of attention, pranidhan. Huh? Ishwar, the controlling factor, from where that attention has come, the source, the controlling factor. So what is consciousness? How do we rise in consciousness? So consciousness comes about by folding attention onto the source of attention. That is, you fold attention back upon itself. You take attention back from where it came. So in normal terms, we would say that, do we remember our aim? Is there a, what do you call, kind of connection with our aim all the time? The Bhakti yogis call this connection as surata. Or like he said in the third or fourth sutra, abhyasa vairagya bhyamatan nirodha, and sa tu dirgha kale nairantarya, without intermission. Is that inner remembering of the source? Is that inner remembering of the source without interruption, or is it with interruption? And that has to, it is a, we will turn it into a kind of practice over here. One of the techniques which is used over here is what they call in Christianity is that thy will be done. So the student comes to this state of Ishwar Pranidhan, and he says that everything is done by that. That means Tat, Tattvamasi. Everything is done by that Ishwar, right? I am just trying to watch, right? And it is this simple technique of bhakti. The Ishwar is the controller, and we don't have any personal will. We allow his will to manifest through us. In life, we are always using our personal will. I want to do this. I want to do that. This should happen. This should not happen. So everywhere it is, we want to seek fulfillment of our personal will. So the bhakti yogi, he comes to a state where he learns how to put his personal will on the side. There is nothing like a personal will. And he allows his will to flow through him. So then he is not doing anything. That is doing everything. That Ishwar is doing everything. And this is a technique where we suddenly, because that is doing everything, we suddenly become the observer, and everything that is happening becomes the observed. Now, this word Ishwara, from Ish, a noun, to possess, to own, to be the master, the Lord, the one who rules or governs, the one who is capable, and were, to choose. Were, that which is excellent, that which is best. When we say Draupadi had her Swayamvar, where she chooses her husband. So Ishwara, to choose the highest, to choose the best. Right? So that which is the best, which is the excellent, we want to choose it. That which controls everything, we want to choose it. Now this word dha, pranidhan, dha, to put, to hold, to carry, but in the sense of filling up. That is, as if we want to carry something
Sir, we can't hear you, sir. Ketav, we can't hear, sir.
Is lower or it is within us. And pra, we do it with intensity, we do it with strength. And that hole which we are filling up is something like the source, which we are filling up the source. Right? Now, that which we take and we fill up, and from which the whole body-brain system is separate, it sort of crystallizes into something like you put
Ketav, can you hear us?
Can you just take a 30 seconds break?
Okay, yeah, I'll take a
We'll
break.
just take a 30 seconds time out.
Okay,
Write it
okay.
up.
Is it okay now?
Is it okay now? Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Sir, you have to go back because you were not at all audible.
Oh, I see. Okay, so we are going to talk about two things, attention and consciousness. So we'll start with attention. What is the quality of my attention? Now, attention is like money. I may have a lot of money, but right now I'm broke. Why am I broke? Because I put my money all over the place, right? So I want to go on a journey, but I have to collect enough money. Wherever our attention is stuck, we get attached. Attachment is the outcome of seduction of attention. So if my attention is stuck in my car, then I'm attached to my car. If my attention is stuck in my wife, then I'm attached to my wife. Every time I free my attention from somewhere, my consciousness rises a little. The self-consciousness rises a little. The technique for rising in consciousness, it starts with freeing of attention. So it does not mean that I, wear orange clothes and leave my car, right, and go and stay in the jungle or something. But I use the car, dissolving the attachment, dropping the attachment to the car, right? And this is very important because if somebody borrows my car and I'll say, oh, he didn't use it properly and now the gear is not working or something of that sort, right? And that means I am attached to the car. Whenever I complain, I'm attached to it. Whenever I find fault, I am attached to it. These are the, characteristics. So the first thing is that can we free our attention? So our attention is caught in physical things, right down from money to all our possessions, in what do you call relationships, right down from our family to friends, and also country. And it is also what you call stuck in thoughts. We have fixed ideas, fixed attitudes, fixed thoughts. We have habits of thinking, and all these are holding on to attention. It is like the soul, when it takes birth, it comes with so much of money, so much of pocket money, right? And that is attention, and it invests that in all over the place, from physical possessions to what do you call relationships, etc., thoughts and thinking. And in the end, the rest of our lives we are broke. We hardly have any attention to use. So the first thing we do is we sort of get our attention back. Now, the soul has taken birth to gather consciousness. From where can it gather consciousness? What is it that the soul gets with the physical body that it gathers it gives it the ability to gather consciousness? As a soul, it cannot gather consciousness, but the minute it takes on a body-brain system, it now has the capacity to gather consciousness. And what comes with the body-brain system are these four functions of thinking, feeling, sensing, and moving. And when we do any of these functions, whether it is thinking, and if we do it with dividing our attention, a part on thinking and a part on self, this is the beginning of self-consciousness. Then from that function of thinking, where consciousness is mixed with that function, we separate the consciousness. We are thinking also, and we separate the consciousness. And that consciousness we take in and we fill in that inner emptiness. It goes back to the source. Pranidhan. This is the whole, what do you call, concept of pranidhan, taking that consciousness back to where it came from, filling that empty hole of consciousness which we have inside. So the soul takes birth for only one purpose, to gather consciousness. And consciousness is gathered by performing these four functions of life with divided attention. Right? So I'm thinking, one attention is on my thoughts, and one attention is on I thinking, the feeling of I thinking. And this feeling of I, as it grows more and more powerful, the higher I rise in self-consciousness. Right? And of course, these were divided into many parts in the old days. If you are doing it with thinking, it is Raj Yoga. If you're doing it with what do you call feeling, it is Bhakti Yoga. And if you're doing it with karma, it is Karma Yoga, etc., etc. Moving center, it is Karma Yoga. And then I remember spending so many years with Vimla ji, and she always used to tell me, Rajan, Jivan Yoga, all the yogas together. Jivan Yoga, right? And for the balanced student of spirituality, he will perform all these four functions of life through self-consciousness. One arrow of attention on self. So from this, we deduce one thing, that all inner work, it begins with the dividing of attention. When we divide attention into I and it, this is the beginning of self-observation. So Rajan becomes the it, and the I is that which is looking at Rajan. Now, so we're dividing it into an observed side and an observing side. And this is the beginning, the basic premise of any spiritual journey. Any spiritual journey. It doesn't matter what religion, whether it is bhakti yoga. The very meaning of the word bhakti is to divide into two. Right? So it doesn't matter which journey we are going on. This is the basic division where we divide it into two. That I and Rajen, the one I'm looking at. And many things change in this. Then Rajan is getting angry and I am looking. Rajan is getting irritated and I am looking. Right? And when I am looking, and if Rajan knows that somebody is looking at him, and he's got to maintain his demeanor in front of everyone, he's not going to get angry. Right? So this inner division, that is the basic premise of all spirituality. So we become the subject of our own observation. Now, whenever our attention is seduced by anything, it may be just a small bright thing which we see in the supermarket or in a store, then our attention is seduced by that thing. And we fall into the sleep of life. With the seduction of attention, we fall into the sleep of life. We forget that there is anything like self-consciousness. And this is the state which Gurdjieff calls as identification. Now, when we divide ourselves, we will see that for our whole lives, it is the physical body which controls that which is inner to the physical body. If you remember in the first 3 sutras, Tawarya Sahib had said there is an inner man and there is an outer man. And the inner man is controlled by the outer man, by the urges of the 5 senses, the urges of the mind, the expectations of the mind, the desires, right? And these control the inner man. The inner man is always following the outer man. Now, the real controlling factor, or Ishwara, is way within. So when we begin this exercise, of observing ourselves. So we say, I'm observing my body. As this observation becomes more powerful, we sense and feel we are creating another body which is separate from the physical body. And it is as if another body is standing behind us and looking at us all the time. And later on, when we go into Tawarya Sahib's techniques of conscious sleep, we will learn to separate this body and hold it in front of us when we go to sleep at night. So it is this. So as we are observing our own selves, we are also at the same time creating, crystallizing, forming a new body, right? And Gurdjieff says that man has 4 bodies: the physical, the astral, the mental, the causal. We won't go into all that today. We'll talk about the 4 bodies some other time. But at present, we don't have an astral body. We have an emotional body. As long as we react in life, our emotional body is always subject to what is happening outside. It is always reacting to what is outside. I like it, I dislike it. And only when we are free of this liking and disliking, this automatic liking and disliking, do we crystallize a separate emotional body, which is called an astral body. And that astral body can form as separate from the physical body. So we see that all spirituality begins with the act of dividing ourselves into 2. And when we start creating this new body, something reverses within us. many things start reversing because our understanding changes. We see life from a very different level. And we understand that in life, effects are on one level and causes are at another level. And we enter the world of causes and we know why there is a certain effect at a physical level. So this is the reverse journey. Now we are going back inside, and we may have a soul, but we are creating the bodies in between the soul and ourselves, which are the bridge to the soul. Those have to be created. The bridge has to be built. Now, whichever religion we can talk of, they all have a certain, they talk of different levels and a different hierarchy, etc. So I'm going to use a bit of Gurdjieff's terminology in this, and I won't bring in too much of terminology, just try to some idea of where we are going in this. So Gurdjieff says that our present state of identification, we have many eyes, and self-observation begins with observation of many eyes. And we are in a state of sleep, we are in a state of identification. What is the characteristic of sleep? It is reaction. We react to external stimuli all the time. Somebody calls me something, we react. Somebody praises, we react. We get good news, we react. Get bad news, we react. Something we expected happens, we react. Something we expected did not happen, we react. Every moment in life, as long as we are reacting, we are in a state of sleep. So this is, say we take this as our present state, where we have many eyes, we are in a state of identification, and we live according to reaction to external stimuli, external stimulus. If we observe our actions, if we observe our words, we will see that they are filled with aggression, they are filled with anger, filled with arrogance, lust, envy, egoistic desires. We talk about people behind their backs. We are holding on to so much of bitterness. We are lying all the time. And this state, all this state is what Patanjali will later on call a state of avidya or a state of ignorance. At an even lower level to this, we may take pleasure in giving pain to other people. And this is one pattern which we must work on, where we get pleasure in giving it back to someone, where we get pleasure in taking revenge on someone, where we get pleasure in being one up upon someone. And it is this pattern which is very deeply embedded within us. And it connects to an inner attitude that I am better than someone. And this has to be observed over a long period of time. We do not know the effects of our actions. I don't know what is going to happen if I get angry on my daughter today, whether she'll get a flu tomorrow. We don't know the effects of any of our actions. We don't know the effects of our habits. We don't know the effects of our behavior. We find it very hard to resist temptation. So this is the state where we've come to this spiritual journey. This is the state we are in, right? And it is acceptance of this state that can lead us further. If I don't accept this state, right, then it becomes difficult to move further from here. Now, once we find interest that there is something beyond this ordinary life of ours, there's something beyond this daily routine of ours. We start asking questions. We start questioning life. What is the meaning of life? And Gurdjieff says that this starts with the formation of something in our emotional center, which he calls as magnetic center. And he says a person who has a magnetic center within him, he may have everything in life. He may have all the comforts of life, all the good things in life. He may be well married and etc., happy in his marriage and children, etc. But still he is not satisfied with life. Having everything, there is some kind of dissatisfaction, and that it is that dissatisfaction which leads him to inquire, why? Is there something beyond all this in life? So once we start forming this magnetic center within us, we start questioning life. The minute the magnetic center forms and we start questioning life, some things change within us. The reverse journey already starts from there. The journey towards Ishwara starts from there. We will see that one characteristic of this is that till now we found fault with others. Now we find fault with ourselves. One of the basic rules of the teaching is, if I am angry, it is my fault. It doesn't matter whether I am right or wrong. It doesn't matter whether I'm moral or not moral. If I am angry, it is my fault. And the minute we sense this inside, that every time I am angry, I am creating a pattern. I'm repeating a certain pattern which is going to make me more angry, and which is going to be the controlling factor, the Ishwara, the deciding factor of what kind of events I will invite in my life. My destiny is going to be determined by that pattern of anger which I am holding on inside of. And suddenly I see that the fault lies within me. I have to start working on my own faults. Only then will there be a transformation. So once this magnetic center forms, we start scolding ourselves that you have potentized the pattern of anger by repeating the anger. You have fallen into the deeper into the state of sleep. We start telling ourselves. In the Mahabharata, this initial stage is depicted so beautifully, especially in the Bhagavad Gita, where the Bhagavad Gita, it starts with Sanjay. And Sanjay is that inner magnetic center of the old king, right? He's telling the king that you have done wrong. It is your fault, right? The king does not listen to his own magnetic center. That is a different matter. And you see, we have to understand that Sanjay gets his, monthly salary from the king, right? But he doesn't praise the king. He tells him exactly how it is. So the fact that we have created a magnetic center within us is that there's something like Sanjay within us, which is telling us, why are you going more into sleep? Why are you going deeper into identification? Why are you repeating old patterns, going into this pattern, this cycle of repetition? It asks questions over there. Now, the first practice which we start on the journey is the practice of non-identifying, the practice of saying no. We have not yet been able to remain in that separate state of observing and observed. Still, the observer and observed are sort of stuck with each other, but we realize that we are angry. We are not separate from that anger. But we realize that we are irritated, but we are not separate from that irritation. And we say to ourselves inside, even though I'm not separate from the irritation, I cannot as yet observe that irritation as I'm observing a piece of furniture, but I still realize that I am in irritation and I am not going to go with that irritation. I'm not going to give energy to that irritation. I'm not going to give energy to that reaction. And this basic understanding that I will not go with it, the act of saying no, no to my anger, no to my irritation, no to my temptations. The ego has so many, what you call hungers, which it once fulfilled. And these are small hungers. The ego will come and say, oh, do you know who did this design over here? I did this design over here. And the ego gets a little bit of what do you call food in this saying that I did this, I am this. And there we starve the ego at that point. So this inner voice is now telling us, starve the ego, don't do this, right? And it is here that we bring in this practice of non-identifying with the ego. We say no to reactions. Now, when we start doing this, we will realize that something else has formed within. Who is this who is deciding not to react? Who is this who is deciding not to give food to the self-love, inner self-love? Who is this? And this is a new ego. It is a new spiritual ego. And this ego is necessary when we start our journey. It is this ego which is going to plan everything for us in our journey. We will get up at this time. These are the physical practices we will do. These are the different practices we will do. This is what we will read today. This is what we'll try to understand today. It is this ego which decides. And here comes a very, very special, what you call, catch-22 situation. It's a beautiful situation that the ego can only die if it decides to die. It has ichha mrityu, right? The ego can only decide that it can only die if it decides to go on this journey of, and it is not, the death of the ego does not happen in an instant. The realization of truth may happen and a glimpse in an instant. But the dissolution of the ego is formed through thousands of years. And it has to go back on this journey. It has to retreat on this journey. I think in the next few days, Buddha Purnima is coming up. And the story of Buddha Purnima, of course, I'm digressing from this, from the Yoga Sutra, but we'll just touch upon it. It's such a beautiful story. And it is said that in his, what do you call, last months before he became Buddha, Gautam was working upon fear. And he was alone in the jungles and he's working on fear. And you cannot work on fear through aggression. You cannot, what do you call, fight with fear. And at one point, he gave up. And he said that there's no way of doing it. And he decided to jump into the river and commit suicide. And so he goes to the river, and the river is in full flood at that time. It was the Niranjana river. And he jumps into the river. And in that moment of, what do you call, jumping in, where he was face to face with death, and he must have had a glimpse of something very higher at that moment. And maybe nature wanted him for some to perform some what you call work. And so the story goes that he caught a kind of creeper at the creek, and he was able to pull himself out of the river, and he was lying on the banks of the river naked. And this girl, he had been fasting for months, so his body had become very thin. And this girl, who was the chieftain's daughter, she was running to the temple to give what you call prasad to the gods. And she saw him there, and she gave the prasad to him, kheer to him. And he was revived from that state because after eating the kheer, and he sat down under the Bodhi tree. And when he sat down under the Bodhi tree, the night was still just starting. And through the night, he went into the past. This is the process of prati-prasav. You have to take the ego back to where it came from. So he may have had a glimpse of truth in the water when he was facing death, because truth does open up when we face death. And through the whole night, he went through backwards, one scene after the other, one after the other. And this prati-prasav, to take light back to all our acts which we committed in darkness, to take the light of consciousness back through all our past lives which were lived in darkness, and to bring light in those lives. And it is said by morning, the ego dissolved, he had experienced the truth. And they say the last star, the star of Venus, as it vanished with the rising of the sun, the ego also dissolved, and he was Gautam the Buddha. So, Buddha Purnima. So, the ego has to go back through a process. It cannot go, you cannot cut it off in an instant, while truth can be realized in an instant. And these are two separate things. Now, we are still upon our state where we are practicing non-identifying. We want to reach to where Gautam Buddha went. And we now look for a right teaching which tells us exactly what to do on this inner path. Now, with the practice of self-observation, this dividing into two, a new conscience starts taking birth within us, what we, in normal language, which we call as vivek, the power of discrimination, the power of deciding what is not, I won't say morally right or wrong, but power of deciding what will lead us to a higher state of consciousness and what will bring us back, seduce us back into a state of sleep. So it is this vivek which suddenly reverses everything. And it starts, what we saw, the faults within ourselves, it now sees the causes of why events come in our life and why we invite events in our life, because of certain patterns which we are holding within us. And then there is an inner struggle which starts over here between identifying and non-identifying. And this struggle is called as tap. Gurdjieff calls it the struggle between yes and no. I want to go with the temptation. I don't want to go with the temptation. I want to go with anger. I don't want to go with anger. I want to go with comparison with somebody else. I don't want to compare. There's this inner struggle, and this inner friction leads to the heat of tapas, the fire of austerity, which burns many impurities inside.
Keto, I think again there is some problem in the transmission. Can you hear me, Keto? Oh, I think sir, connection drop हो गया है उनका.
Looks like. So
Yeah,
we have to
maybe.
wait.
Yeah, maybe 1 or 2 minutes.
Yes.
I think he has
Got disconnected. Okay, where were we?
Sir Tapah, struggle.
Now.
Where were we?
Tapa, struggle.
Tapas.
Okay.
Inner struggle.
Inner struggle.
So it proved a little too much for the internet connection.
Now, once we are moving into self-observation, we realize something, that of the many eyes, there is one eye is always the observing eye. And we start getting a feeling for this observing eye. We start getting emotional about this observing eye, right? And now, to make this observing eye more powerful, we start making our own exercises, our own meditations, because now we realize that this observing eye has slowly to become more powerful, where it is observing our thoughts, our feelings, our sensations, our actions. And we can make small, what do you call, aims. One of the simple aims which I really like is, which I use very often, is that when I have to stand in line, right? So we make a small aim at that time, that I'll just observe and I won't allow myself to react, right? So over a period of time, I get a little bit of dharana shakti, a little bit of patience from what I'm doing. And what do you call, this aim increases the power of the observing eye. So this is the time where the student is now becoming a little creative. He's not just taking exercises and teaching from the teaching or from his teacher. He's now making his own exercises for going ahead. Now, we must understand, where we did the first sutra, Atha Yoga Anushasanam, that there is a, what you call, structure, there is an instruction manual of yoga. This situation, what does yoga say and what do I want to do? In this situation, yoga says, don't react, do this. In this situation, I want to react and put that other person in his place, right? Now, this is the struggle, identification and not identification. It's in front of us. And over a period of time, slowly my personal will to react, my personal will to fulfill my expectations, my desires, starts dissolving, and I only follow the will of the work. And when this situation starts happening, and when the will of the work works through us, it is as if the divine will is working through us. This is the period in the journey which brings tremendous joy, because when the higher will works through us, there is so much of ecstasy and joy. But when we fulfill our own will, oh, I want to buy a new car, I fulfill my will, there is a small period of satisfaction and that's the end of the matter, right? But there is no real joy. This Joy happens when that higher will works through us. And it is this period of in our work, in our inner journey, when we start experiencing the will of the work over a period of time, we have learned to keep our personal will on the side. Now, once the will of the work starts coming, it is now the time to progress a little higher from self-observation to self-remembering. Now, what is the first act of self-remembering? How do we do the first act of self-remembering? And we must, before we practice self-remembering, for a long time, observe our feeling of I. What is my feeling of I? Where am I getting my feeling of I from? Somebody praises me. Does my feeling of I change? Then I'm getting my feeling of I from something outside, which is definitely not the real I, from somebody praising me. Where am I getting my feeling of I from? This month I may do very well in business and earn a lot of money. Does my feeling of I change? Then the feeling of I definitely changes, because more money has come into that feeling of I. The feeling of I is dependent on something outside. Now, from this false feeling of I, which is dependent on so many things, my name and people calling my name, and when somebody says that, okay, he has a BA degree and somebody has a PhD degree, etc., and the feeling of I which comes out of that, all this is dependent upon external things. This can never be the real feeling of I. So, the real feeling of I will only come through a process of self-remembering, where it takes us back to our original feeling of I. There was a feeling of I when we were born, before we were given a name. Then the name becomes the feeling of I is a different matter. And this pranidhan, return to the source, go back to that original feeling of I. Now the time has come. Now we must experience that, what do you call, inner feeling of I. This is the experience of the soul within. So what would be the first act of self-remembering? The very first act, the very first time we practice self-remembering. So suddenly we see, we are observing ourselves, and I say that Rajen is in a bad mood today. Now, as long as I am observing, I say Rajen is in a bad mood, but there will be moments when the bad mood will take me over, and I will say I am in a bad mood. Again, I'll be observing, and then I'll say Rajen is in a bad mood, and I am watching. And again, I may get what you call seduced into the mood, caught in the mood. I'll say, I am in a bad mood. I am angry. I am happy. I am this. I am that. Now, when I see myself in a bad mood and I see that my I has gone with the mood, it has gone with the mood, it is attached to the mood. It's not a, I'll use the word, we are all adults over here, but one of becoming the mood, we use the word sarupyam, vritti sarupyam in the beginning. Sarupyam means to take the shape of the mood. That I, that drashta, that seer inside has taken the shape of the mood, right? Sarupyam, become one with them. But one of the deeper meanings of the word sarupyam is to enter into prostitution. So my I is prostituting with my anger. Can you see what is the meaning of identifying? To end, it is prostituting with my bad mood. Now, at this point, I realize it, and this is the first moment of self-remembering. I extract my I out of the mood. I say I am in a bad mood, and then I bring my I. There is a feeling of taking something out of the mood, as if there is a, what do you call, a cloth in the bucket of water, and I pull the cloth out of the water, leaving the water in the bucket. The cloth has come out, the napkin has come out of the water. Similarly, this is at a very subtle level, at a psychological level. I bring my I out of the mood, and when I experience that I inside, this is my first moment of self-remembering. And this can only be done after a long period of observing my changing feelings of I. Right? Morning, my mood was this. So this was my feeling of I. Then some good news came. My feeling of I changed. Then again, some bad news came. Feeling of I changed. I saw the news. My feeling of I changed. Yeah, you watch the news. Watch the news. And you will identify with something on the news. You'll identify with something with your religion. You'll identify with something with your caste. Will identify with something of a prayer or something of that sort. Now pull your I back. That I has no religion. That I has no prayer. It is nothing. Just pull it back. Pull it out of that. There is a state of identification. The minute this happens, that we have pulled our I out, the observing I becomes more powerful, and a new feeling comes inside, that there was an emptiness inside. Now, in that inner emptiness, we have filled it with a presence. And one of the commentators on the Yoga Sutra, he has translated this word pranidhan, the practice of the presence of God. He calls it the practice of the presence of God. So the minute we are self-remembering, we are holding the presence. But we must not practice holding presence before the first extraction. People start practicing holding presence. People start self-remembering before they have done the first extraction from identification. Then they will never get the real feeling of I. It will always be something wrong. So when we pull it out, there is that feeling of I have pulled something out from the sleep of life. I've drawn it out of the sleep of life. Till now, everything in the sleep of life I called I angry, I this, I that. That I has come out. Life is different. And this I, there's a sensitivity of that I. And over a period of time, there is a beautiful emotional feeling of that I. This Gurdjieff calls as real I, which comes through the practice of holding presence or self-remembering. This is, in real essence, this is what self-remembering is. Now, we just go back over this, what we talked about. And Gurdjieff has divided it into 4 parts: identification, observing I, 5 parts: identification, observing I, deputy steward, real I, Ishwara, right? So we'll just go through these. So first is the state of identification, many eyes, right? Mechanical man, mechanical ego. Then comes the observing I, the state of self-observation. As observing I goes deeper, it brings different forms of understanding. It changes our emotions. It leads us to self-remembering. right? And we start having a flavor of self-remembering. Then comes the state of deputy steward. Now, when we are observing many eyes inside, most of the eyes want to take us away from consciousness, back into the identification of life. But there are some eyes which want to take us to the state of awakening, to the state of higher consciousness. Gurdjieff calls these eyes that want to take us to a higher state of consciousness as work eyes. And those which want to take us back into the sleep of life, he calls as life eyes. A time comes when we have many work eyes. We have created many. It is like the Pandavas were the real eye, but they created many work eyes. That is the whole Pandav army. So we create many work eyes, right? Like somebody has taken away my money. Now I'm identified. My money has gone, right? So then I bring in a work eye which has a certain understanding about money. It says money really doesn't belong to us. It belongs to a higher central bank. We are trustees of money for some time. And suddenly that attachment to my money, it dissolves a little. The work eye has done its job. Similarly, we have all these different understandings and these work eyes are there. When these work eyes, they at a certain point in our journey, all these work eyes come together and they crystallize as if something within us is helping us on our journey all the time. From within us, it is something which we have created of our own. And it is this which Gurdjieff calls the state of deputy steward. But we have not yet reached the real I. We keep practicing self-remembering, deeper and deeper states of self-remembering. Then next state, he calls that of steward. Now, after the deputy steward is done, we have reached a state of consciousness. We went into that sutra, Tivra Samvega Nam Asana. Asana means near. We have come very near to the soul inside, very near to the real I inside. And it is the, magnetic field of the real I starts pulling us inside. Now it is our effort on one side, and from one side, the higher, it sort of helps us through grace. This falling down of grace, this avtaran of grace, this grace in our lives, where very moments we would have slipped into identification, we would have gone back, but something gracefully happens and we are reminded again to lift ourselves up. This grace which comes, it comes from the higher. The guru, the inner guru is now trying to send messages to us. And this state is what Gurdjieff calls as steward. The steward comes from above. It's, very well said in the Bible. Before Christ, Christ is the soul, the inner soul. And the whole drama of Christ was enacted. And before Christ came, there was John the Baptist. He used to baptize people in the river Jordan. And he would say that I am baptizing you with water, but the one after me will come who will baptize you with fire. So, when the steward comes, we are now getting baptized through water. Baptized through water. And as our consciousness goes beyond the steward, now it enters into that magnetic field of the real self, and it comes closer to the consciousness of the real self, the source of consciousness, the source of attention, the soul. Then at that point, we are baptized by fire. Now, this baptism by fire, we have to go into it. We'll just go into it a little bit. We won't, because that is beyond the Ishwar Pranidhan state. But before that, I think I've explained this journey from where we are to Ishwar Pranidhan. I'm going to take my teacher Tavaria Sahib's what he has written. I'll just read it a little. Tavaria Sahib says, by intense devotion to Ishwara, knowledge of Ishwara is gained, right? Please don't take this as verbal knowledge. This is a different kind of knowledge. Now, I'm just reading what he writes. Now begins the beautiful state of Radhe Krishna. Now, this is, I remember when he was explaining this Radhe Krishna to us, that scene is so, what do you call, vivid in my mind even today. I mean, he closed his eyes and he was, I'm not reading what he's saying, I'm just trying to repeat what he said at that time. And he says, initially this body, brain is Radha, and the inner astral body which is forming is Krishna. Then he says the inner astral becomes Radha and the mental body becomes Krishna. And then he says the inner mental body becomes Radha, the causal body becomes Krishna. And then in the real I, Krishna and Radha become one. Right? So he was explaining, and he was, he had, closed his eyes. And I think he was in that, what do you call, that totally divine state when he was explaining this to us. So he's saying, now begins the beautiful state of Radhe Krishna, the complex human structure. Radha is in love and adoration of Krishna, who stands for Ishwara, that inner Ishwara, the reality, the Satyam. The disciple will burst with ecstasy. All mental concepts, all our conditioning will be thrown overboard. He has now bathed in the loving light of Krishna. So, this is what Tavaria Sahib writes. And I just want to talk about one thing more before closing. That when consciousness comes to that state of Ishwara, when we have filled in that emptiness totally, which we call as totality, Purnata, that consciousness has to be fixed. That consciousness has to be crystallized. Again, it is in a liquid form. It has to go into the ice box and become an ice cube of ice. Gurujev calls this process of crystallization. Now, for crystallization, you need tremendous heat. Tremendous heat. And for this, we have to understand that whenever we are in pain, physical, mental, psychological, whatever we do, that pattern becomes crystallized. Supposing I'm running a high fever, and from morning to evening, I'm complaining, why did I get this fever? And God is not looking after me, he's looking after everyone else, etc., right? Then this pattern, this sanskar of complaining, this karma of complaining becomes more powerful within me because I'm doing it at the time when I'm in big heat, I'm suffering. So whenever what do we do when we are suffering? What do we do when we are in pain? Now, at the time of being in pain, can I do self-remembering? Can I do self-observation? Can I practice non-identifying? Then that new habit of non-identifying, that new habit of self-remembering, that new habit of three-step rhythmic breathing will become very powerful because I'm doing it when I'm passing through suffering and pain. So whatever is done when we are suffering, whatever is done when we are in pain, that pattern goes very deep within us. Christ reached a state of consciousness which was called as Christ. From that state of consciousness of Christ, He had to go to the state of consciousness, which was Father. And for that, he needed deep suffering to fix that consciousness. And that is why he enacted the whole play of dying on the cross. He needed that suffering. That suffering was the key to crystallize that consciousness. So, but this sutra, of course, is about up to the state of Ishwara. So I think I've explained it today. The next sutra is what is Ishwara? We'll take it next week, next Tuesday. If there are any questions, we can take the questions.
Baptism by fire.
Huh? Baptism of fire through tapa. Through tapa. Through tapa. We create our own fire through struggling between identifying and non-identifying, through struggling between getting attached and separating from attachment. So struggling between seduction of attention and holding attention inside. We create our own fire, our own friction. Right.
Yeah.
Any other questions, sir?
Yes, sir. So the role of I as a deputy steward, that I couldn't quite catch.
Okay. There are many eyes. This you
Yes.
got? Now,
Yes,
most of these eyes want to lead us back into what you call identification. Right? Supposing
Yes.
I want to fast today, then there'll be 10 eyes which will telling me how bad fasting is for my health, etc., etc. Right? So these are those eyes which will come up in my brain, in my mind, and tell me don't fast. It's bad for the body. You'll get diabetes, etc. Whatever. Right? So they want me to pull me back into the sleep of life. But there are some eyes which want to take us to a higher state of consciousness. That is deeper understandings about life. Right? And those understandings, at some moments when we are going to get identified, those understandings, they come and they help us. Simple understanding that there was this great, Taoist teacher, Le Tzu. And Le Tzu's best friend, his young son died in the war. The king had taken him in the war. So this best friend he would sit on his farm and cry the whole day. So his wife didn't know what to do. She went to Le Tzu and told Le Tzu that this is what has happened. He's not plowing the fields. There are going to be no crops this year. What will we do? So Le Tzu went to him and he says that, do you remember the day we got married? You got married. He says, yes. Your wife was looking so beautiful and you were so happy on the day you got married. And he says, yes. He says, did you have a son on that day? And he says, no, you were still happy on that day. You did not have a son. Now, this is understanding. And when this understanding comes at the right time, it is called a work eye. So we have so many different forms of understanding. Now, the state of the deputy steward is all these understandings, they come together and they form a sort of separate entity, like a library, that they can be available at the right time. Karna had the understanding, but at the right time, it didn't come to help him. He forgot the mantras in the battlefield, right? So the understanding may be within us, but it has to come at the right time. So the deputy steward is that state where we gather all our understandings, and those understandings are available to us within ourselves at the touch of a keyboard. That is deputy steward. I hope I've come across in that.
Very clear, sir. Very, very clear. Thank you.
There's no one more. Yeah?
Someone raised a hand, Himaji.
I can't see, Kedar. I don't see any hand.
Veer had raised a hand.
Anybody wants to ask a question?
No more.
Himaji, you had a couple of questions.
Yes. So as far as because I was reading the book, In Search of Miraculous. So there is, I mean, it's written there that organic life on Earth is for the development of moon. But why many religions we pray moon? Full moon is considered auspicious. Full moon is considered, it's related to intuition. It's related to creativity. So there was some confusion.
In usually our shastras, there is the two aspects of the moon, and one aspect is called as Chandra, and the other aspect is called as Som. That is the higher aspect of the moon. Right? Now, certain things in life, if the what you call heat was to fall on it directly or light was to fall on it directly, they would burn up. So light has to fall as a reflection, and that is why the moon. But the moon also has a dark side, which is a permanent dark side. And that is the dark side of our mind, where all our hidden, what you call, animal nature lies within us. So there is a light side of the moon and there's a dark side. In the Mahabharata, there's a beautiful description of the moon where Anna, the food which we eat, it comes from the sun. But when the sun sets and the rays of the moon fall on the soil, and the full moon has the capacity to lift the water in the soil because it leads to high tide. You understand? So the moon has an effect on water. Now, where does that water go? We'll go into that a little later, but so it is the rays of the moon which fall on the same plant which is giving us food. But when the rays of the moon, that is the reflected rays of the sun, fall upon the same plant, and the action of the moon pulls that up as water. So the mixture of the rays and that water, it does not bring it does not bring food. It brings aushadhi, it brings healing. Now, supposing I say that, say we take one plant, say celery, right? So celery is a green, this thing. So it has all the qualities of a green. At the physical level, it will give vitamin, it will give this, it will give that, whatever the celery has. But it also has a quality of lowering blood pressure. Can you understand what I'm trying to say? So the quality of vitamins and all will come from the sun, that is Anna, but the quality of curing blood pressure will come from the moon. So the quality of aushadhi in everything that we eat has the quality of Anna also. It has the quality of aushadhi also. The quality as aushadhi has come because of the moon. The quality of giving poshan, what do you call, nourishment, that has come from the sun. You understand? So the moon has a special quality, but because the moon also has a dark side. And if the dark side is awakened of the moon, then that light and that, what do you call, aushadhi quality, instead of aushadhi, it will go into increasing the dark side, the manifestation of the dark side, right? And it may awaken my animal nature in different ways. So we have to take the lower side of the moon and the higher side of the moon, both sides of the moon.
So how we will decide which part we are taking?
Huh?
Again, with self-observation, we will decide what is increasing in me.
Yes. that we have to first accept that all of us have a dark side. Right?
The shadow side of us.
Yeah. Yeah. And our aim of rising in consciousness to more light into that dark side. That is the whole, what you call our aim of rising in consciousness. Now, supposing you promise me something, and then you say, oh, I can't do it, right? And I show a good face to you, but for a moment, something like this happens inside. You understand what I'm saying? Can you get what? I may clench my teeth or I do something, inside like this. And this happens to everyone. At that time, I must observe, this is the dark side of the moon coming out. Can you get what I'm trying to say? If I observe it and I look at it, then light goes into the dark side. So many of our reactions, they are normal reactions, but sometimes our reactions are so powerful. I mean, the anger can be so powerful that nobody wants to stand in front of that anger. And that comes from we have connected to the dark side. And sometimes I can insult you in normal words, but sometimes I can insult you in such a terrible way, in such a demeaning way. Something connects with that dark side, and I just find the right words to, demean you completely. It just automatically flows from which in normal circumstances it would not have, but I connect to my dark side. Right? And we have to take light into it because a lot of stuff is lying. The universal mind is lying there in that dark side.
So one more thing, where comes the tears come in when you are going through pain or suffering, when you cry in the pain and suffering? Does it come in the tapa, the fire, or it's again some kind of buffer that we talk about?
We don't allow it to become a buffer. Tears, you see, there is a nadi connected with tears, and it is like a release valve. When the suffering is beyond my, endurance, I start crying, right? And I just release it so I can stay with the suffering. So crying can be very purifying, very helpful at that time. But then crying also can become a habit. And there I have to be aware of it. And crying should not happen because of weakness of my nerves. After a certain age, some nerves become weak. So some people, they may start crying on small matters or something of that sort. That's the weakness of the nerves. But real crying is a very beautiful thing. It's a very beautiful thing. You have come to a state of suffering, and that it helps you to sort of hold on to that state, bring dharana into that state. So it's very helpful.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Rajen bhai, what happens, I don't know. Whenever
Yes,
I talk about God and whenever I feel about something inside, but I start weeping. I don't know. Last time you must have observed when you said Radhe Krishna,
yeah.
I started weeping badly. So you said you have used that cotton in the right nostril.
In the right nostril.
I did it.
Right.
Yeah, I did it for quite some time, for around 8 months. Then I left it because I'm in Varanasi right now. So why that comes?
Right.
Whenever the name of the God comes or whenever the figure comes, I mean, I don't know. Even when I read Ramayana, I start weeping.
There are two things. One is we connect to something higher, and there's an inner feeling of joy, and the tears are of joy, right? Or the tears could be of nostalgia, right? What I'm saying is that it should not be because of weakness of the nerves. That is why I told you to block the right nerve.
Right.
Those are, I mean, they're very natural and should happen. Right? They should happen.
Thank you.
So I have one question.
Yeah.
Sujata ji, you have to ask.
I just wanted to know that.
Okay. You have to start your video so that I can pin you.
Yeah. Actually, I'm having a little network
Okay, no issue, no issue. Please continue. Please continue. No issue.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, sir, that okay, now, like supposing as you gave the examples that someone has told me something and I'm aware that now I'm getting into the dark side of the moon, or like I'm getting into the anger mode. So how do I, start to pull myself back? Like, do I when I've been doing this a little bit actually without even realizing it. So whenever someone tells me, then I just tell myself like, okay, Sujata, stop it. Like, you're not going to get into this mode. And if I feel that I can't handle it, then I just sort of move away from the situation. So am I doing it is that the right thing to do, or how do I become a little bit more
Definitely the right
like
thing.
I wanted to know that is that, yeah, because I talk to myself, like, okay, Sujata, stop it. Like, don't react. Like, take a step back.
It's always beautiful to create a dialogue with the self. And right. And
Okay.
this is like the inner Sanjay telling you to not to do this. Huh? And at present, we are like the blind king. So we need that Sanjay to tell us. But if you practice tensing and relaxing the muscles, the exercise of tensing, and if you can reach 20 seconds of each tension, holding each tension, then at the time of reacting, if we just do a little bit of tense and relax of the muscle, it creates enough space for us to observe our reactions.
Okay. Okay. So it's better not to, means sometimes when it's not handleable, I tend to move out of the room. So
now, if you cannot handle, move out of it. Try to tense and relax the muscles. Try to bring in rhythmic breathing. Breathing, and try to observe. If you cannot, then just walk away from there.
Okay. So like one step at a time. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, Vatsalaji, you want to ask? Yes, please.
No, it is just my Guru Dakshina. It is the feedback. After listening to your scriptures, sir, I have genuinely welcoming any physical pain and suffering, because I have seen the benefit it does and I've experienced it. I thought I will share it with you. And this is only after I started listening to your lectures.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Shall we close?
So just a minute. Any more questions? Gaur sir, you want to ask something?
No, I don't want to ask. I just had a little announcement.
Okay, sir.
We have been doing some sound healing sessions, and there is something like a program going on these days, and last 4 days are left. So I just want to offer it to everybody who is there on call today. So I have put the invite link in the message box, in the chat box. So everybody who can, who wishes to experience sound healing, they are welcome to join. And if you cannot copy this link from there, you can just contact me. I shall give my number in the chat box. Double 88790100. Parag Khandelwal says no link visible. You must have joined late. Shall I give it to you again? Okay, I'm just putting it in the chat box again.
Thank you, sir.
Parag, is it visible now? Yes. And still, if some people cannot get it, then I have given my number. They can contact me. So these sessions are available for the 4 days, including today, from 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. So anyone who wants to join is welcome, and it is free. So that is all that I wanted to say. And Rajan bhai, today's session was it was an outstanding piece in the sense that it touched some really, very intricate aspects of his spiritual life. And many people get into that observing, but it is difficult to go into the self-remembering mode. So it was quite an eye-opener, and it was very nice. And only when we go into the self-remembering mode, then we can see the power that is there. And it is no longer that emptiness is filled with immense grace and power. So it was a wonderful session. Thank you so much, Rajan bhai.
Thank you, sir.
And
would you like to close, sir?
Okay, I'll do the Shanti part.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Om Sarvesham Swastir Bhavatu Sarvesham Shantir Bhavatu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhino Sarve Santu Niramayah Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May there be peace and auspiciousness everywhere. Thank you, dear Rajan bhai. Thank you, everyone. We shall meet again next Tuesday. Till then, bye-bye.